At last, the veil of ignorance, which is a phrase that's more commonly associated with Rawls than is the difference principle. Again, I think neither phrase is very self-revealing, but the veil of ignorance is a fascinating thought experiment. And it's a social contract thought experiment. We've said a couple times now, I've said a couple times that Rawls has said, you know what, if we all had a chance to sit down before we entered our culture and we could be thinking, intelligent human beings, and we got to design the rules. We knew things would not be fair in the world, but we got to design a system to address and redress that unfairness. What would we come up with? Well, he says we would come up with those two principles of justice: equal access to all liberties, equal liberties for all, and the people who won life's lottery would help the people who didn't, the difference principle. And he would take his students and other people through this thought experiment that now is known as the veil of ignorance. So he said, and forgive me for using stick figures to do this. I'm going to illustrate his veil of ignorance philosophy here and his thought experiment. And gosh, I don't mean to talk down undergraduates, but undergraduate students, sometimes this is not the easiest idea for them to grasp. And so I started teaching it with stick figures and showed it to my graduate students one year, and they said, "Oh, please use that. That makes it more clear for us as well." So it's probably my fault, not Rawls, that I wasn't explaining it very well. But we live in a culture. Look at the stick figures, where some of us are born strong, some are born poor, some born sad, some are born to rich. We're born rich to loving parents. Some people, like my poor old student who is fine and thriving now, get hit by a car. Takes all kinds to make a world, and that's how our culture is right now, with that level of diversity. So here is Rawls' veil of ignorance thought experiment. Let's move left to right in this slide. He says, here we are on the far left, this diverse society. And let's imagine that we walk through this thing he calls the veil of ignorance. And here's the key point. What the veil of ignorance does is strip us of our identities. I walk into the veil of ignorance as a 66-year-old, basically healthy, white male. I walk through that and I come out equal to everybody else. You can see they've walked through the veil of ignorance. Everybody is the same. And they move into this place called the original position. And, at this point, if you want to, figuratively shake John Rawls, why isn't the original position where we started? Well, it's not. It's kind of that pre-societal thing. So he calls it the original position. It's confusing, but I hope the basic idea here is clear to everyone. You can see I've obviously spared no expenses in the amazing graphics for this presentation. But we've gone through the veil of ignorance here. All our stick figures now are exactly equal in terms of income, gender, intelligence, weight, height, you name it. There is no difference. And they'll tell us what we're here for. Hey, we're now on a desert island. I'm looking at our first stick figure. And now we're all exactly the same. And now here comes the crunch. And we're here to decide the new rules of justice for our old society. That's why this is called the original position. We're going to originate new philosophy of justice. And Rawls would actually put people through this thought experiment and say, what should justice look like? You're going to go back to a culture where everything is going to be unequal. How do you address that and redress that? How do you fix it? And more often than not, the people who went through this thought experiment and took it seriously would come up with his two principles of justice in their own language and something like the difference principle. So Rawls is pretty confident that if we just had a choice about how to deal with unfairness in life, this is what we would come up with, would be the difference principle. And so he uses the veil of ignorance to show how he arrives with confidence at the effectiveness of the difference principle. So our third speaker is going to say, and this is a really important point, we don't know who we'll be when we return to society. This is the kicker. You go through the veil of ignorance, and before you go through it, you know who you are. Again, I'm a 66-year-old healthy white male, relatively good income, relatively intelligent. I could emerge going back into our culture once we've done our work in the original position, and I may lose all those unearned advantages. I could be and I'm sorry, I know this gets so distasteful. I could be a less favored gender. Is there unfairness related to gender? Yes. I could be a less favored race. Is there unfairness attached to race? Yes, there is. I might have a learning disability. I might not have been born into the middle class family that I was born into. Um, we don't know who we'll be, so we're going to make rules to protect ourselves. So finally, our last speaker here says, oh, we don't know who we're going to be when we return. Our last speaker says, in that case, I want policies that reward initiative and hard work, but that also protect and aid the unfairly disadvantaged. And that's how we move to the difference principle. People that Rawls would put through this thought experiment usually ended up with something like the difference principle that rewarded hard work and initiative, but protected people who had not won the lottery. So our group of equals has been sitting in the original position, or it looks like they were standing in the original position, and they've been thinking of what justice would look like and what social contract they would develop that they'll try to enforce once they get back to their original culture, their original society, with all its inherent unfairnesses. And one of the strengths about this is how self-interested it is. They want to protect themselves if they win the lottery, so initiative and hard work will be rewarded, at least there's certainly that possibility, but those people who got unearned disadvantages will be given a hand up so that they can try to launch their own hard work and at least with fewer obstacles. So there's really let's do what's good for society, but let's also look out for number one in drawing up the principles of justice and the difference principle. Okay, our equals are marching off the original position now. You can see them moving to the veil of ignorance, and one of them says, okay, we've made our new social contract about justice, now back to the real world. I wonder who we'll be. Because again, we're going to go back through the veil of ignorance. We'll regain identities, but we're not going to get probably our original one. We will re-emerge through the veil of ignorance as someone else. Maybe with advantages, maybe with disadvantages, maybe with some kind of mixture. And so they go through the veil of ignorance, they emerge, they're all different, and one of them saying, hey, I'm not who I was before, and they go back into society, and let's hope they enforce the contract. And now the original sad person is now the born rich person, and he or she is saying, I'm glad that's over. But now I need to use my unearned advantages to help the less fortunate. And we're going to hope that the social contract that leads to the difference principle is going to be enforced. Okay, now we know what the difference principle is, and we know where it came from. It came from the veil of ignorance thought experiment. So Rawls, bless his heart, says that this works on the social scale, but he says This also works, the difference principle also works on the situational scale. And when we are trying to resolve an ethics dilemma with the least amount of damage, we are definitely at the situational level. So, how do we apply Rawls to an ethics dilemma? We've seen Kant give us the categorical imperative. We've seen Aristotle give us the arrow. Mill is greatest good for greatest number. Agape is asking us to ask those two key leadership questions. How do we apply Rawls? You've probably already guessed this. Our second bullet here, we've got our list of stakeholders from Mill. So we look at all the people involved in the ethics dilemma and we say, who lost the lottery in the three key areas? Who was life or fate treated the most unfairly? Who got the worst unearned disadvantages in the three key areas? And we look at all our stakeholders and say, you know what? Given Rawls' three criteria, this person is the most disadvantaged person. Another way Rawls comes at that is if you look at the part in parentheses, he says, ask yourself, which role would my worst enemy assign to me based on the three criteria? Remember our GLASS acronym: genetics, good luck or bad luck, and social status at birth. Of all the people in the ethics dilemma, who would your worst enemy make you be? Someone who wishes you harm. I know that's so negative. Who would your worst enemy make you be based on those three criteria? Okay, we single out that person or that group. Look at number one. We create a solution, let's call it solution A, that addresses that person's needs. And in doing so, we are enacting the difference principle. We're the person with the power here. We get to come up with a solution. That gives us a big advantage here. And, maybe you will be involved in this dilemma. Maybe you're one of the stakeholders, and maybe you really will be the worst off. That's usually not how it goes, but it could happen. And if that's honestly the case, then build a solution around yourself. But given Rawls' three criteria, we look at who is the worst off, and we come up with solution A to try and improve that person's lot in life. And that's the working of the difference principle. Now, I told you Rawls comes up with more solutions and more nuanced solutions than almost anyone else. You can keep running with this. You can say, okay, we've enforced the difference principle. We are trying to better the life of someone who got some unearned disadvantages. Who's second worst off? I'm looking at point number 2 here. Who's second worst off? We've taken care of party A. And you say, okay, well, this person is the next worst off. Okay, now go with me here. You can't change your solution. You've already come up with your solution. You can't go back on it. You've got solution A, but can you tweak it to add something to protect the second worst off stakeholder? See how that goes? Now your solution is A plus B. And now you ask yourself, you can see how this works, who is the third worst off person? Oh, it's her. Okay, we're stuck with our combination of solution A and B, but can we tweak it to take care of her? Now, Rawls won't always play out this way, but when it does, you come up with these amazingly nuanced decisions, all of them based on the difference principle. And just with our Rawls hats on right now, they're honoring the social contract that we probably would have developed for ourselves if we were all able to go through the veil of ignorance and into the original position and develop what justice as fairness in an unfair world might look like. Rawls will become even more clear as we get the chance to apply him to case studies.